Welcome to the Time Lord Victorious Canon. You will be exterminated! Negative. These humans may prove useful. They will provide views and maybe even comments. They are not Dalek. They are inferior and must be exterminated. You must see the bigger picture. They are useful pawns in my master plan. But I really want to execute them. You may exterminate them after the video, after they have unwittingly served the Dalek Empire. Fine. Welcome to the Time Lord Victorious Canon Update.
Hello, I'm Phil. Welcome to my channel where I talk about all the pop culture that I love and consume. And recently I've been consuming a lot of Time Lord Victorious, the Doctor Who multi-platform event that crosses books, comics, audio dramas, short stories, and animated series. I probably missed off something there. And books, novels, don't forget novels. That's a lot of stuff, and you might not be getting it all, so that's where the Canon Update comes in. Each week I break down all of the releases that have come out that week and what we learnt and how they tie into all the other Time Lord Victorious releases even that we've had so far, so that if you are not getting all of it, you can see where the ones that you're not getting tie into the ones you are getting, if that makes sense. This week it's all about the Daleks. We've got two Big Finish audio dramas to cover. The 4th Doctor starring Genetics of the Daleks and the 8th Doctor starring Mutually Assured Destruction. We've also got a Dalek short story that came with the latest eaglemoss set, and we have, of course, the final episode of the Dalek animated series. Now, in case you're wondering, the novel All Flesh is Grass also came out this week, but I have yet to receive my copy. I really need to get onto Waterstones about that. So I'll be covering that in the next edition of the Canon Update. Just to say, thank you again to Matt Chambers, who provided the voice of the Daleks for my little opening sketch at the beginning there. You can check out his channels in the description below. Let's get started, shall we? So, we had the final episode of the Dalek animated series. It was called Day of Reckoning. Previous episodes have seemingly seen the Daleks all but wiped out by the Mechanoids. Only the Emperor and the Strategist are survived, or so we believe at the beginning of this story. These two have been pursued back to Skaro by the Mechanoids. Except, they're not really the last two, and after luring the Mechanoids to Skaro, the Emperor recalls all of his Daleks from off-world, and also from deep in bunkers of Skaro. The Strategist pretends to betray the Emperor in order to manipulate the Mechanoids, saying that he wants them to adjust the Dalek beam projector to open a portal to the Entities dimension and send the Emperor there. But the Strategist, once the Mechanoids have done that work, just uses it to send the Mechanoids through instead, potentially wiping out the Mechanoids if all of the Mechanoids came to Skaro. We don't know that. After this, when the Emperor and the Strategist survey the battleground, one of the wreckages of the Mechanoids is possessed by a small amount of the entity, which warns,
"You have no idea what is coming for you."
Now, if anybody was watching the Dalek animated series in isolation and not the rest, they might think this is setting up a sequel, but what I think it's actually referring to is setting up for the Titan Comics Defender of the Daleks, which we have already had. Because I think it's referring to the Hond, which was the adversary of the Daleks in that Defender of the Daleks comic, which they sought the help of the 10th Doctor to defeat. Now, we're never actually told this in the animated series, or in fact in any of the narrative elements of Time Lord Victorious, but the information booklets that come with the eaglemoss sets have revealed that the entity we see in the Dalek animated series works for the Hond and is a servant of the Hond, and therefore it's the most likely outcome of this warning. Now, how much time passes between this and the Titan comic Defender of the Daleks, where they face the Hond with the help of the 10th Doctor, I mean, who knows? But narratively, for the Daleks at least, that's the next part of the story. Next, we got the 8th Doctor in Mutually Assured Destruction from Big Finish. Now, I really would have liked to have covered these after All Flesh is Grass, because I think this picks up pretty much directly on from the events of that book. Won't know for certain until I get it, but that's the impression I get. And in fact, I find it quite strange that this was released before the book. Admittedly, only a day before, but still, before the book. Which, given this is narratively after the book, it seems like a bit of a strange choice in the release orders. Anyway, the story starts with the Daleks saying they've been betrayed by the Doctor and the Dalek timeship is in disarray after an explosion. They assume the Doctor perished in the blast, but of course he survived. He survived, in fact, using the heat shield he was given on Athana. In the Big Finish story, he kills me not. The Dalek ship is in the time vortex, trying to get back to their own time. Now, according to the release timelines, as I said, this takes place immediately after the novel All Flesh is Grass. 2 other non-Daleks are also on the ship, Groff and Tiska, who emerge out of cryogenics. Now, this is because the Daleks have been going around collecting samples of species from different planets in the Dark Times for experimentation. We've seen this in both one of the eaglemoss short stories and in the Tales of the Dark Times mini-comics in the Comic Creator app. Trelessa rings a bell in the Doctor's memory, and eventually he remembers that it was on the list of planets in the Rexian library. This is from the Big Finish release, The Enemy of My Enemy. The Daleks wiped out every Trellesian apart from the 2 they took for experimentation. On her home planet, Tiska had actually been responsible for experimenting on captured Daleks. She slightly admires them, as her field is effectively eugenics. In this story, the Doctor finds out that the Daleks devolved the Rexians with their own weapon. We saw this at the very end of The Enemy of My Enemy, but the Doctor up until this point wasn't aware of it. We get to see that divisions are starting to emerge within the Daleks on the Dalek ship. The Executioner goes a bit rogue, and the Commander and Strategist come into conflict themselves. The Doctor manipulates them into a full-blown conflict, leading to the Strategist exterminating the Time Commander. The Dalek ship disintegrates in the vortex as the Doctor and Tiska escape in the TARDIS. I think it's implied that she might travel with the 8th Doctor for a while, so maybe sometime later down the line we will see her travel, a series of her travelling with the Doctor, or possibly they're leaving this open for any sequel multi-platform events that they have coming up. The Dalek ship disintegrating pretty much leads directly into the next thing we will cover, the Dalek short story Exit Strategy, which comes with the eaglemoss, Dalek Executioner and Dalek Strategist set. This story starts with the Dalek Strategist falling through the time vortex. It's a story from its perspective. It's the Strategist thinking back on their actions as he falls. From his point of view, we see other Daleks torn apart as they fall with him, including the Dalek Executioner. The Strategist ponders where their plans went wrong and concludes it was with the Emperor's secret plan, which he wasn't made aware of, to wipe out the Gallifreyans before they became Time Lords. In this story, we learn that the Dalek Strategist considered as though it was his manipulations that led to the 3 Doctors fighting each other, but attacking Gallifrey drew the Doctor's attention unnecessarily. It predicts that the Emperor's reaction to their failure will be to blame others and not his own plan. The Emperor will be emboldened by its defeat and probably declare war on the Time Lords. So the Time War then. By the end of the story, the Strategist decides to escape the vortex and be there for the Emperor's war against the Time Lords, and if the Emperor fails, to step into its place to succeed. So the Strategist makes an emergency temporal shift out of the vortex. We're also told that the Strategist had gathered some of the Keturah crystals. These would be the Mordella crystals that we first learned about in the first novel, and with them it has enhanced its casing. Given it doesn't look like the Strategist is going to appear in any releases set after this from the Daleks' point of view, in this event, this seems to be a bit of a loose end. Could this be part of another possible setup for a sequel event series that they might do if this one has been successful enough? Because if this has sold well, and all indications are that it has, I think they'll be eager to do it again. Maybe in a year, maybe in 2 years' time, but I think at some point we're going to see something like this again. And they have left a few threads open, like the 8th Doctor's potential companion, like this Dalek Strategist, which they could draw on for that eventuality. Of course, in the booklet we also get lots of little bits of information. We learn a bit more about the Dalek executioners in the booklet. Their brain processors have been programmed with successful attack strategies, and their higher functions have been replaced with backups of their core functions, allowing them to persevere even if mortally wounded. Their casings are made of double-bonded polycarbide plating, making them extra tough, but also slower than your average Dalek. Any object perceived by Executioner's eye stalks is automatically overlaid with targeting possibilities and available extermination protocols. As for the Dalek Strategist, most of the information in the booklet is what we've already learnt from other entries into the event. But it does expand on the notion of the Strategist being an extremely old Dalek, much older than the Emperor, and it speculates, but doesn't confirm, that perhaps it's been there for almost the whole of Dalek history, including all of the encounters with the Doctor. Finally, we have the Big Finish released genetics of the Daleks. So what do we learn in this? Well, it's set in the year 2985, in case you're a dates-minded person and like to know that sort of thing. It's set aboard the Starship Future, which is the same ship as the escape room a Dalek Awakens takes place on. This is a prequel to that event. It's a generational ship with crew revived from sleep on rotation, and they have found a Dalek floating in the Oort cloud. This is one of the Daleks that we have just seen trying to escape the dark times in the Dalek time ship in Mutually Assured Destruction, and probably one of the ones that was falling through the time vortex with the Dalek Strategist in Exit Strategy. The crew think there's no Dalek mutant in the casing and plan on studying the shell. The Dalek mutant is outside of its casing, however, and working with one of the humans, Brooke, a scientist. Brooke has been controlled by the Dalek to make a machine that will create more Dalek casings, and the Dalek has been using him to alter the cryogenically frozen humans to make more Daleks by injecting them with Dalek DNA. When the Fourth Doctor arrives, he assumes the Time Lords have directed his TARDIS to this ship for some reason. That is, however, just speculation on his part. Initially, as often happens, he is captured by the crew. Matters are complicated a little bit by a separate criminal plot to replace the crew, but that doesn't really massively tie into the whole Time Lord Victorious element of this story, so I'm gonna leave that to the side. Go listen to it if you want to. It's a very good story and I very much enjoyed it. When this original Dalek encounters the Doctor, he tells him that he's encountered his future incarnation and that the incarnation defeated the Dalek Time Squad. Again, he's referring to the 10th Doctor in events we are likely to see in the book All Flesh is Grass. The Dalek also tells the Doctor that he will become ruthless and act against his own morals. The Fourth Doctor refuses to believe this and also doesn't want to know about his own future. The Dalek is hoping to influence the Doctor not to become the Time Lord Victorious, and uses the fact that his future actions will lead to the crew of the Starship Future being turned into Daleks to try and persuade him of this. Though through the sacrifice of both the crew and even some of the criminals, the Daleks are defeated, and at the point where only one other full Dalek had been created with the machines. Quite a few mutants had been created though, and they were all sucked into space. So the Doctor leaves, thinking the colony ship can safely go on its way, with a new temporary captain. But given this is a prequel to the escape room, you can probably guess it's not quite all over yet. Because that original Dalek had survived. Severely damaged, mind you, but he did survive. He's discovered by the temporary captain, who is of course immediately exterminated, and the Dalek declares that it must get to the warp core to utilise its power and repair, which, although I haven't done the escape room, I believe is the plot of that. You've got to stop the Dalek getting to the warp core. It's probably the one bit of Time Lord Victorious I won't actually experience, is the escape room, because I'm not going to escape room at the moment. And other than the book, that is all the releases we had this week. I will hopefully be back next week to cover the book if I've read it. Depends when it arrives, but at some point in the next 2 weeks, I will have the Canon update to cover the book. And then, well, there's not another release till February, I think, with Echoes of Extinction, the delayed Big Finish one that's coming out on vinyl first, which was meant to come out at the end of November. It's now coming out in February. That's the next release, February. I mean, really, the event is kind of winding down with the book now. There's a couple of little releases left. You got the live immersive theatre event next year, which I do have tickets to, and this Echoes of Extinction, and then there's one more eaglemoss set. I have no idea if there's a story in that one. It's not about Daleks. It's got the Time Lord Victorious figure and Brian the Ood. We might get another short story in there. But the big bulk of this will end with the novel. So it'll be interesting to see how that ties everything together. It's been fun. Don't forget to join me for that edition covering the book. If you've enjoyed this, if it's been useful to you, don't forget to hit the like button, share it around, subscribe, all that jazz. And I will see you again soon. Thank you. Bye.
Exterminate!